Good evening, everybody. Today we are going to have Colin Minielly. He is a GIS specialist in environmental science, and he's done over 9 years in ArcGIS remote sensing. He's an expert across the industry, and he enjoys it, and he keeps up on education in it because he was at Nova Scotia last year at the community college taking his another degree in his same field of expertise. He is also involved with triathlon Saskatoon Club. He is a Toastmaster with Woodland Communicators and on the executive. Colin enjoys techie things, so to say he's quite up on the computer things is not taking and exaggerating it at all. And as far as calendars, he can do them in his sleep. So let's take and welcome Colin Minielly, Building Your Calendar. Colin Minielly.
Thank you for the introduction, Margaret. Only thing I think you left out on the fun kind of overview of me is I'm also an area director and a club president.
Well, you can only put so much in the introduction.
That is absolutely true. But all of those pieces put together brings us to why we're here today, is to focus on creating a club calendar. Before we go too far into today's presentation, I do want to put a small disclaimer in front of you that this workshop will be focused on developing a calendar within the Google Calendar structure. There is obviously integration that can occur between other systems, such as Microsoft or Linux or Apple, and this integration is fairly similar to Google, but there obviously are going to be differences. Majority of what I'm teaching and showing you here today is transferable, just may have to take a few more minutes. So the big question for today is to understand why we need a calendar, why we need more calendars, or the club needs a calendar. I want to share two quick stories with you guys first. First one is my family loves to travel. Every time my mom goes and books a tour, she's telling her friends and family about the next trip. And she looks at me and my siblings. I told you about this trip, didn't I? You have those dates, don't you? The best piece of this story is when my dad looks at my mom and goes, I don't even know about that trip, and aren't I going with you, honey? I got to a point where I was very frustrated with this story that I decided that our family needed a calendar designed specifically for keeping track of these trips. And it's worked wonders for our family. The second story brings us a little bit closer home to Toastmasters. My home club was very active over the summer. We have one Zoom account for our club that any executive can use, and our Zoom account was being used to its capacity with training, with executive meetings, and at some point we even held a youth leadership within our club. Sure, our club executive can email each other or text each other, but if you're on a call, you're not checking your phone. The solution I came for our club to manage all of these little pieces of just even the Zoom was a calendar. And as soon as we got our calendar in place, we understood what was going on with the Zoom. Everything calmed down in the background, and we got everything done. Making a calendar, I can think of three key components about the calendar. First of all, having a calendar in place at the club level really helps to ensure consistency of the event. There's no more possible excuses for you to say that you scheduled the meeting at 7 a.m. or you accidentally put it at 6:40 p.m. or you put it on Wednesday. If it originates from the club calendar, it's made once and it's repeated to everyone who needs it. Building on this comment, a club calendar is really useful to start organizing the club, understanding the pieces of the puzzle that belong to your club. When is your next executive meeting? When's your next special event? How do I plan my life so I can support my club? It's all built into accessing a calendar. But the final piece of why we should be working on this calendar is I firmly believe that having a calendar for your club is truly foundational to other integrations of your club. I'm talking about you can add your social media plans into the calendar. You can start scheduling coffees with prospective members. You can start doing the mentorship. It all starts from that organization. And where you take this is truly up to you and your club. And that, my friends, is why we're here today. So the goals of our workshop today are to first, we're going to go over some Google Calendar basics. We're going to learn about setting up recurring events. We're going to look at sharing a calendar. And we're going to look at adding events automatically. So for today's workshop, it is set up in one of two ways, and we'll let everyone kind of decide how we're going to meander through this. I do strongly encourage you to have on a separate window if possible. Have your club account or a personal account ready to go so you can kind of play around. The information that I'm showing here, I have designed it to be as organized as a step-by-step guide as possible. So we should be able to walk through this. There is a copy of the PowerPoint slides that will be made available to all attendees of tonight's workshop. And this again is to help you further understand where you can go with this. If you guys are ready, before we move into that part, if you are unfamiliar with how to get your Zoom out of full screen, quickest suggestion is click the escape button, and that will make the Zoom window a little bit smaller so you can open up a second window for the browser and we can start. So for this workshop, it is from experience that I really suggest when you are talking about creating a calendar or managing your calendar to work directly from a browser. Third-party software says it'll communicate to the Google server, and for the most part it does. Building on my experience though, in trying to make a calendar and manage it at a high level, the third-party software just doesn't save something properly. So for our tour today, recommend you go to calendar.google.com. And once you're there, if you have never logged on to your calendar.google.com browser, this is most likely what you will see. Your configuration might be a little bit different. I know my personal calendar is different than the club calendar. We're going to walk through a few basic points on the screen here. The first point here in the top right-hand corner, that red circle, that tells you which account you're logged in. Reiterating the point, if you're making this calendar for your club, I highly recommend as soon as possible, connect this to the club account. You may be able to switch from your personal to the club. Some things won't save properly, makes it hard to configure. So in here, we are set up. I have chosen the correct account and ready to go. In the bottom corner here, shows you all the available calendars that are connected to this account. There are two or three that normally come. You can always configure this. Once you make a new calendar, it does show up in your My Calendar list, and that's how you know it's ready to go. We're going to, in a couple minutes, we are going to look at actually making a new calendar. So to make a new calendar, you just got to press that plus button that is beside the other calendar. When you will press the plus button, you'll see this small menu here. I have circled 2 out of the 5 options, which are create a new calendar and the word from URL. We're going to focus on those 2 since I have seen the most value in those 2 options for my Toastmasters Club. The other 3 options have a place, and maybe your club wants to use them. Opportunity to explore Google Calendar later. If you're looking back at this main calendar page and you see the top left-hand corner, the word create, this is where you get to create events. You can create tasks, or you can schedule appointments. That create button is quite powerful. We'll return to that in a minute. When we're talking about a calendar, depending on how your club is set up, depending on what information you want to share, you may be able to use the default calendar to your advantage, or you may need to or want to create a separate calendar for various purposes. If you're using the default calendar, you may ignore this slide for a second. But if you're making a new calendar, it is all you need to simply do is fill in the details. You are going to fill the name of the calendar, a quick description. I recommend having the correct time zone to where the club is situated or where the person managing this is working from. This gives you another option to confirm the owner. If the owner is not the correct email account, I personally suggest you close out of this and make sure this is reconnected. Once you have done all of those 3, fill in those 3 windows and check the owner, you can hit create and your calendar is made. I would have put this idea in place here. If you have access to the calendar on another device, such as your phone or third-party software, I would take the opportunity to double check that the software has been loaded onto that other software. Each software has different rules and different ways to refresh. I would look into those separately. If after a while the calendar hasn't been added to that device, that indicates a server-related issue, and you just need to come back onto Google Calendar, hit delete, and try again. There's no way around it, and there's no description as to why that I have found. So now we have either a new calendar ready to go, or we have our existing calendar that we just want to make an event on. Do you remember on that main screen, the top left-hand corner had the create button? You click on it, create event, brings up this window. Here, you can fill in the details. You can put the title, a date and time, and you can add a location. Adding a location can be something such as the physical building that you're meeting in, a legal address, or it can be a meeting link. You can either use a meeting link that already exists, or you can have Google create it for you. On screen here, it is showing only Google Meet and Zoom as options. You can integrate Microsoft Teams here. And especially if you are using a third-party software and you want to try it out, Microsoft Teams may also be the default. When on the bottom of the screen here is an option to add a description. The description is a great option to place a copy of an agenda or meeting minutes or other attachments. You can even attach a Google Drive file. This becomes important later on depending on how your event is managed. Going into a little bit of a deeper dive into creating this event. Near the top of the screen, when you're creating an event, you'll see the words does not repeat. If you click that drop-down menu, you see all of these options. This is your ability to make the meeting or the event recurring. And in my experience, this is actually very recent that Google has actually released all of these new options. So this is ever changing, it's becoming more interactive. So if you're talking about a club meeting and your club meets every week, you may want to put recurs to weekly on Tuesday. If, for example, your club meets every 2 weeks, but you also meet Tuesday and Friday, you can go into the custom. And if you look on the left right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the custom recurrence page. Here you can further refine how you want the meeting to show up. This can be really important for when your executive changes over or when a season ends for a special event. This page is completely configurable to what you want. And if you need to change one specific day, it will not necessarily impact the entire meeting. Just be aware of how you can configure that later on. At this point in the meeting, or in the, or not meeting, in the event creation, because we're making a meeting, you can hit done and you can hit save, and you have created a recurring event. Earlier on, when you were looking at the page, you may have seen the option to add guests. This tool allows you to keep track of who gets the invite, so it's a form of attendance. You can set out automatic emails about updates, and you can send out reminders and notifications all through this page. So you don't have to go into a third-party software or into your email. It's all done for you. I have put in my personal observation as some cons with using guests. I have seen in the past where many events will disappear from my calendar if the post is using the guest page. Now, I really hope that this is a Colin issue and not a server issue, but regardless of whose fault it is or where the issue lies, this is something that you should be aware of if you plan to use the guest list. One way to circumvent and just ensure that the emails are being sent out properly would be to use a second email of your own or work with someone specifically and send a follow-up phone call or text and ask explicitly, did my email come through for this event? Is it in your calendar? If they say no, there's a server issue and you should resolve it as soon as you can. Otherwise, people may not show up to the event. We have gone through the basics of Google Calendar. We've made a recurring event. We have looked at the guest list. Now we get an opportunity to look at how to manage our calendar. We're going to talk about the sharing permissions, a little bit about notifications, and even how to integrate. If you're following along on your own calendar, if you want to navigate back to that main page, and where you see my calendars, you will see 3 dots stacked on top of each other beside your calendar. If you click those 3 dots, you'll see settings and sharing. Once you click on settings and sharing, you'll be brought to the settings page. And there's a lot more settings on this page than I want to review, but you have full control over your calendar here. I want to focus on sharing our calendar with specific people. So if you scroll down to the share with specific people or groups, you can go and add people to here. You can change their permissions by that gray box in my example that says see all event details. This approach to sharing the calendar with specific people is said to be the most secure option of sharing. Members will receive an email, and once they accept the calendar, it'll show up, and only those people can see what's going on. This option allows for editing of events, so people can change events, they can delete. But if you're talking about an organization or a company trying to manage a calendar, such as a manager and a secretary, this is how you want to be communicating such that you can kind of help each other. So this type of sharing is a really good idea. Now, the other type of sharing is, if you're on that setting page, says integrate calendar. I purposely didn't put the screenshot here because there is nothing in that integrate calendar window that actually has useful information. But when you're talking about integrating a calendar, you are creating a shareable link for someone to put on their calendar. So a shareable link is a URL. So it'll say www.calendar.google.com, followed by about 200 other characters, which is specific to your calendar only. When we're talking about this sharing and the shareable link approach, when someone puts it on their own calendar, they can't edit. But all the details are shown. And all the details being shown includes the all events. It shows items such as location, and I'm pretty sure it uses and shares the guest list. I am very hesitant to use the guest list because I haven't had good success. Something that Google says when you do this, you make a public link. This doesn't mean everyone in the world will be able to access your calendar, but it means that the calendar is shared on the Google server in a different manner than sharing the calendar like the other way. If you look at that integrate calendar window, there's about 4 or 5 different options. Some may be grayed out for different calendars and different organizations. The most common format is the public URL to this calendar. That's the one we're going to use. Now that we have this shareable link, or you've been sent one by another organization, what do? This is where we're going to go back to that add calendar button, and we're going to go to the from URL. In this window, you're going to take that URL, starting at the HTTPS and all the way to that very last backslash. Go ahead and place it in here, and you can hit add calendar. Simple, in essence. When would this be a good idea to use this approach? At the club level, this is the best approach I can think of for sharing an event, where you don't want members to be able to change the event. You just want members to be able to see the information at hand. Be it the Zoom link for all meetings, or you're going to this special event as our workshop to see the Zoom link there. That's where this public URL approach is a strong idea for a club. I'm sorry to jump around, but we're going to go back to our settings page if you're following along. In the settings page, there's an opportunity to set notifications. If you use notifications wisely, you can strategically set out reminders without having to do anything. You can set a reminder for a day or two in advance, or 15 minutes for start. When we are in the settings page, we are looking at the default rules. These are the rules that are going to be applied to every event. Yes, you can change them, but if you don't put any other effort into your events, this is what's going to happen. Working with custom reminders is an approach that is taken a little bit at the back end when you're setting up the actual independent event, such that if you share a calendar to your club meeting, maybe you only want to put the reminder every 15 minutes or half hour before the start. But if your club is holding a speech contest, you may want to put the reminder a few days in advance, and then an hour before, and then 15 minutes before. That's where the custom reminders will play in versus the default reminders. Integrated into these reminders is the pop-up notification, which will come up on your phone or in your email, or a standalone email notification. Use both of these options wisely for your event, and you will start to maximize engagement and attendance to your events. In doing this research and preparation for tonight's presentation, I found out that you can share the event and only an event. You can share that a little bit differently than calendar. So wouldn't it be useful to generate a QR code or a shortened version of a meeting that has all of the information ready to go? I think that is a useful tool when you're talking about special events. So let's look at how we do this. You're going to go navigate to any event that has been made. I recommend saving the event, closing the window, and coming back in. So we're into a fresh look at our event. In the top right or top center, you'll see an option that says More Actions. If you scroll down that list, you see Publish Event. Now, to me, that word doesn't sound quite right. But if you click Publish Event, you can see that there is Copy Link to Event and Share. That prompt brings up the window that is on screen here. If you have someone that is techie in your club, or you're putting something directly onto a website, using the HTML code would be the most stable. For the types of events that Toastmasters clubs do, I think the link to event link is the more appropriate route. With that link to event, you can copy that, put it in an email, put it on your newsletter, and you're good to go. The person gets to see your event as it is created in your calendar. But because I mentioned it earlier and my research made me really think about this, let's take this a little bit further. If you take that link to event link, you can send it through a QR code generator, such that it can be on paper. This can be in an email. And the guest just has to take their camera, click, and they have all the information. But if you're putting this in a newsletter, seeing that calendar.google.com/calendar/event/action/template// that's really hard to read. So there's an idea of a structure called a shortened link, which would make an example of a shortened link. Google does their own, but it's bit.ly. So it's a https://bit.ly/ usually 6 characters or maybe 10. So we've gone from 250 characters to maybe 10 or 15. We're still using our calendar. We're still getting the information out there. We're now making this even easier for our guests. We're engaging them, and we're ensuring that calendar information is consistent. It's all here in the pieces of our puzzle. One of the final things for tonight's presentation is if you're using Zoom like we are, did you know that Zoom will actually make your calendar event for you? So if you have access to the Zoom account for your club, you're going to go in, make your event like normal so you can get the meeting ID. Nothing has changed. Once you hit save on that event, or if the event already exists, go into edit. The option on the bottom that says add to will become available to you. We are in Google Calendar, so we're going to click add to Google Calendar. Once you follow all the prompts, and especially if you're logged into multiple accounts, make sure you're connected to the correct account. You will see the event created with all of the details that are on Zoom in your calendar, ready to go out. This is done automatically. We are, by using this integration from Zoom, same integration exists for Teams and other platforms. I've used it several times. The benefit of this, we are automatically creating events to a calendar that is probably shared. So we are ensuring consistency and we are maximizing member engagement. So just in a quick conclusion for tonight, we spent a little bit of time on some of the basics of a calendar. We have figured out how to create recurring events. We've talked about sharing. We've connected to Zoom. All of this is designed to make the calendar more useful, more engaging, and easier on whichever club member, or even on a personal level, whoever is managing the calendar, make it easier to have a consistent platform. My firm belief that this is a foundational piece of your club's management. This is another tool to add to your club's communication toolbox. Today, we have only scratched the surface as to what Google Calendar can do. Where you take Google Calendar for your club is up to your club, up to you. And once you start using the calendar effectively, you are never going to stop using the calendar effectively because you've made your life that much easier. I want to thank everyone for attending, and I hope you're able to follow along. I am happy to open the floor to any questions. I'm going to stop my screen share and return control to our Toastmaster of the evening, Margaret.